Well, thank you, Heather. It's great to be here, and it's nice of you to invite an Englishman to come and speak to you on a Scottish education agenda. But I'm actually from the northeast of England. I'm a Geordie, so I'm almost in Scotland. It's a very interesting time to be an educator in Scotland, I think. And I want to say publicly, I'm absolutely in favour of the broad direction that the education system is going in Scotland over the recent months. I think the focus towards greater school autonomy, regional collaboration, the curriculum for excellence, I think is all the good direction to travel. But what I want to talk about this afternoon is the importance of power and love in teaching, in professional development, in school leadership, and in how you run the country. Power and love in teaching, leadership, professional development, and national leadership. I want to explain what I mean by power and love. Power is the drive to achieve one's purpose, to get the job done, to push things to a conclusion. And love is the drive to connect things, to bring things together, to unify people. And my argument is going to be that we need both power and love in teaching and in leadership. Let me explain a little more. Martin Luther King said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." And that is why we need both power and love. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about here. Power is about being driven, pacey, relentless, indomitable, challenging, having high expectations, holding people to account, assertive, confident, and determined. Love is about being kind, inclusive, collaborative, having good relationships, being invitational, asking for help, empowering others, showing compassion, being humble and empathetic. And too often we think we either have to be powerful or we have to be kind, but I'm arguing that we need to be both. And first of all, I'm going to talk about power and love with regard to teaching. Then professional development, then school leadership, and then system leadership. So first of all, power and love in teaching. Let me try and explain here. Power in teaching is this: the authority of the teacher to command the learning, to have clear boundaries, to keep the pupils focused on the tasks, to have pace and challenge in the lesson, to be knowledgeable about the content and confident about their subject, and ambitious for children, believing that they can be what they might become rather than just what they are. And to be honest, I've been to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools and been in lots and lots of lessons. I've seen too many that haven't had enough power in the teaching, where the expectations have been not high enough, where the teacher hasn't been confident enough about what they're teaching, or when the pace or the focus has not been strong enough. But colleagues, although that's really, really important, you can't be a great teacher without it. It's not sufficient. Because it's not just about power in your teaching, it's about love in your teaching. It's about accepting the children for who they are when they walk in the door, wherever their background, wherever they've come from. It's about creating a climate where children feel safe, safe from harm, safe to learn, safe to make mistakes. It's about being inclusive so that no child is left isolated. It's about a teacher who has an eye on the vulnerable in the classroom, the ones who are isolated or left out. It's about showing empathy and connecting with the pupils. If you think about teachers in your past, when you were a child, who you remember the most, the chances are there'll have been some empathy between you and the teacher. And it's about helping children to take responsibility for their learning so there's less dependency. And my argument is it's not about power or love, it's about power and love. And as a teacher, it's good to reflect on that when you're evaluating your own teaching. Have I got the balance right? And when you're watching someone else teach, it's a good thing to ask, have you got the balance right between power and love in teaching? And then I want to go on to talk a bit about power and love in professional development. When you become a teacher and you start teaching in your first job, most people improve rapidly as a teacher. In the first 2 years, you really do improve significantly. You learn fast, you have to. But then what happens is, it's not such a steep learning curve after that. It evens itself out. And the worry is that too many teachers stop learning and stop developing. It's almost as if like when you grow, you reach a certain height and then you stop. And the challenge is we want every teacher and every leader to carry on learning and carry on developing, not just to stop when they think they've got the hang of it. And we know the thing that makes the most difference to improving teaching is great professional development. Great professional development. School-based on the whole, classroom-based, practical professional development. And I'm going to argue that we need power and love in professional development. But it's not just about practice. You know this term that if you have 10,000 hours of doing something, you become an expert at it. It's only partly true. Here's a quote. The 10,000 hour rule, that this level of practice holds the secret to great success in any field, has become sacrosanct gospel. The problem, it's only half true. If you're a duffer at golf, say, make the same mistakes every time you try a certain swing or putt, 10,000 hours of practicing that error will not improve your game. You'll still be a duffer, albeit an older one. It's not just about practice. There was a famous study by Ericsson about violinists. And he found that the people who became the best violinists did hours and hours and hours of practice, but they worked with a skilled violinist who gave them focused skills to work on and regular feedback about their progress. This is key. And let me give you a personal example to explain what I'm getting at here. About 5 years ago, I was so unfit and so unhealthy, I made a big decision in my life. I decided to get a personal trainer. I invited him to my home for an initial discussion. And I said, I have 2 rules. By the way, I'd never done any exercise since I left school at 18. And I was in my mid-50s. So this was a big thing. I said, I have 2 rules. One is no running. Secondly, I'm only going to do this exercise in the privacy of my own home so no one else can see me. Those are my 2 rules. So he said, okay. So I booked an hour a week with him, and he came for his first session. He rang the doorbell. I did not want to answer the door. I was regretting it already, okay? He put me through this strenuous workout in my own living room, and at the end of it, he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is very relaxed, and 10 is so tired he can't speak, how do you feel? I said, 9.5, and I feel sick. On the 3rd week, I was sick. But gradually, I became fitter. And I became a runner. I became a runner. And believe it or not, this is me a year later doing the Great North Run, half marathon in Newcastle. That's me crossing the finishing line, okay? So you've got to ask the question, how did I come from someone who wanted to be fit to someone who habitually became a runner? And it wasn't because I just wanted it. It was because somebody cared enough to relentlessly, even when I wanted them to go away, to not go away. To start with me as I was, which was a very unfit person, to model it for me, to give me regular feedback, to set me tasks, to evaluate them, and to keep it so, and to turn a commitment into a habit. Now that is great CPD. And that is what great CPD is in schools. When I go to schools that have got great CPD, that's what I see. I see every single teacher, every single leader involved in improving their own practice with colleagues. Mentoring, coaching, supporting each other, reviewing lessons, setting themselves targets, evaluating their own practice, and that is great CPD. So let me try and encapsulate what I'm talking about here. So power in professional development is persistent and consistent support and challenge. In your organization, do people get persistent and consistent support and challenge, like I got from my personal trainer? So there's no escape. You are going to have opportunities, you're going to be asked to improve, you're going to be talking about your own learning. Do you get robust and honest feedback like I got from my trainer? Do they use data and impact to challenge and focus? And evidence-based practice to question current approaches, rather than carrying on doing the same thing. That's the power side of professional development. But the love side is starting with the needs of the teacher. Not expecting each teacher to need the same things. That no teacher is left isolated. The worst thing you can do in a school is say we're going to have, our weak teachers are going to get support and our strong teachers are not. Every teacher should have coaching and mentoring, not just the weak teachers. If you have a deficit model, it will fail. Every teacher should be involved in their own professional development, not just the ones who aren't performing as well. It's about empowering them, teachers owning their development plan, not a top-down. So how do you get the balance right between power and love in your professional development in your own school? But the main thing I want to talk about this afternoon in Power and Love is about leadership. Power and love in school leadership. This document is a report that my organization that I used to lead published last year. It's called Rapid School Improvement. And we looked at, in England, 100 schools, primary and secondary, who within 2 years had gone from, judged by Ofsted, the inspection system, gone from special measures, which is the worst category, to good or outstanding, which is the second best or the best category, within one jump, straight from special measures, awful, to good or outstanding within 2 years. There were 300 schools in England. We looked at 100 of them, and we talked to the teachers and the leaders and the governors to find out what was going on in those schools that led to such rapid improvement. And there were some common, not surprisingly, some common aspects in the leadership of those schools that I want to talk a little bit about. There was a driving preoccupation with teaching quality and impact. It was almost relentless. It was almost the only thing the head teachers spoke about. Teaching, 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 learning, 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 quality, 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 impact, impact, impact. Everywhere. That was the whole culture of the school, was focusing on improving teaching and learning, improving teaching and learning, improving teaching and learning. That was a power side. That's a power bit of leadership. Essential systems in place and implemented consistently. Consistency. Not some going well, some not going so well, but every classroom, every corridor, throughout the school. Consistent systems. That's again a power side of leadership. Good use of data to challenge, to monitor progress, to challenge and to recognize good and celebrate achievement. Again, that's the power side. But also, spotting talent within the staff. Using the best to help the rest. Developing and motivating and building morale and getting the best out of others. Showing love in your leadership. And building coalitions for transformation. Coalitions not just with the staff, but with the parents and with the young people themselves. I don't know whether you know about the 6 styles of leadership from Daniel Goleman. You probably know these pretty well. They've been around for some time. 6 styles of leadership. Coaching, affiliative, democratic, commanding, pace-setting, and visionary. I think these have stood the test of time quite well. And you can obviously read this stuff to find out a bit more. But commanding, pace-setting, and visionary are more the power side of leadership. Democratic, affiliative, and coaching are more the love side of leadership. And Goleman says you probably need all 6. There's no one way to lead. You probably need to have a range of leadership styles depending on the context that you're in. He argues, however, that these 2 here, pace-setting, commanding, are the ones which are the most dangerous, especially if that's all you do. In other words, if you just have the power bit and not the love bit, you've got a problem. Now, I remember I was making a speech a few years ago at a conference for head teachers. And I was talking about leadership, and this head teacher came to see me at the end, and he said, can I have a word? He said, I'm in trouble. It's a strange thing to say. I'd never met him before. He said to me, I'm in trouble. I said, well, what is it? He said, well, I've been ahead now for a year, and I'm working flat out. Pace, pace, pace. I'm going in at the crack of dawn. I'm working till late at night. I'm pushing, 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 but no one's listening to me. The trouble with pace setter is you can be out there leading from the front, and you look behind and no one's following you. But we have to have power in your leadership. No one wants to be led in a school by a leader who's not confident and focused and pacey and knows what they're doing. Here's a quote. Sorry, get the right thing. Here's the quote. Once a commitment is made, the goal will seem larger, bolder, and more exciting. Leaders need to fix on it like a laser beam. They need to see it intensely, even obsessively. They feel it, they hear it, they taste it, they smell it. It becomes part of them, their very identity. Something they're committed to make happen, come what may, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. We are going to do great things for these children, whatever it takes. This is what's going to happen. It's my goal, and it's absolutely, I smell it, I hear it, I taste it, I feel it. That kind of drive, that kind of passion, that kind of focus is essential for great leadership. About 14 years ago now, my wife and I bought a new house. And when we went in there, we drew up a long list of all the things that were totally unacceptable in the house. Totally unacceptable. That needed significant improvement. We set about with some enthusiasm to improve the house. We got about 2/3 down the list, and then we stopped. Now, why did we stop? 2 reasons. The first one was we ran out of money. But the second one was we stopped noticing the things that initially were unacceptable. We just got used to them. What was unacceptable became entirely acceptable. And that crack on the windowsill is still there 14 years later. We don't notice it anymore. This is the key, what I'm talking about leadership. You go into a school, you're the new head teacher or the new deputy, and you say, right, these are the things that need to change because these are my standards. This is my expectations. And if you're not careful after a year or so, you've lowered your expectations. You've adjusted. You've just got used to it. And the really good leaders keep focusing, keep relentless, keep having those high expectations, do not accept second best, and drive improvement in the interest of the children. But that's all well and good on the power side, but you've got to take people with you. There's a great book by, I can't remember, it's called Why Should Anyone Want to Follow You or Be Led by You? Why Should Anyone Want to Be Led by You? Goffey and Jones. And they say, it's a great book. They say there's 2 reasons why people will want to be led by you. First of all, they'll be led by you if you are authentic, genuine, not playing games, honest, admit mistakes, in it for the right reasons. Authenticity is key. The second reason why people will want to be led by you is they think they might know what you're doing some of the time. So credibility as well. But authenticity is really crucial. And what leaders want, what staff want from you as a leader, they don't want you to be unfair. They don't want you to give them favors. They just want you to value what they're doing, to understand what they're doing, and to value it. And you as a leader have to understand that few people live simple, uncomplicated lives. Not only the children, but the adults in your school don't live simple, uncomplicated lives. And as Plato said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. This is the love side of leadership, and it is so important. I don't know whether you followed a study that came out last year in England. It was, just find it for you. It was research. Just going to read this quote. Some of you have seen this quote before. It's a well-known quote. It's an African proverb. If you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. It's a great quote, isn't it? But it's often misinterpreted. People use it to say we've got to collaborate. That's why they use it. But that's not what it's saying. If you listen to what it's actually saying, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. Well, actually, as leaders, we want to do both, don't we? We want to walk fast and far. We don't want to wait a few years to make a difference. We want to make a difference straight away. We can't wait around. Children only get one chance at an education. We can't say, well, in 5 years' time, it'll be better. So if you want to walk fast and far, sometimes you're going to be alone, and sometimes you're going to be together. Sometimes you're going to be focusing on the power side, and sometimes you're going to be focusing on the love side. If you want it to be sustainable, it's got to be love. If you want to be fast, it's got to be power. And actually, we need both, power and... So sometimes as a leader, you'll find yourself isolated. You'll find yourself feeling a bit lonely because you're trying to drive change. But if that's all you feel, just the loneliness, then you haven't got the love side right. It's how to get both so you walk fast and far. This is the study I'm talking about. It was last year in England, and they looked at 160 secondary academies. It's interesting questions. Those were the two questions they asked in 160 academies over a 5-year period. So it's a longitudinal study. And they just published their second bit of research on this last week, actually. It's by Ben Laker. They found certain types of leadership going on in these academies. And they gave these types of leadership names. And I'm only going to talk about 3 of them. There were more, they gave 5, but I'm only going to talk about 3 of them today. The first one they called the philosophers. And the philosophers were school leaders, head teachers, and they treated their staff really well. Teachers are very excited when the philosopher arrives to lead the school. She tells them, or he tells them, how important their work is, and how much value they add to society. They start going on trips to observe other teachers, and they invite teachers to their school too. There's a lot of collaboration and sharing going on. And you feel really valued. But fundamentally, nothing changes. Students carry on misbehaving, parents are still not engaged, and children do not make the improvement that is needed or expected. When asked why performance hasn't improved, the philosophers say, these things take time, teaching is an art, and it can't be transformed overnight. Colleagues, the philosophers are an example of leaders who are good on the love side, but not good on the power side. People feel valued, but children lose out. They then came across another kind of leader, who they called the surgeons. Now, the surgeons were the hero heads, the big names. They come in and they really turn the place upside down. They typically don't stay long, though. They take tough action. The surgeons are ruthless in the way they deal with staff. They exclude students in order to maximize exam results. They're very skilled at the quick fix. They're focused not so much on the children and their learning, but on what is needed to do well in the accountability system, whatever it takes. And they usually bring about immediate improvement in results. Immediate improvement in results. But these results are not sustained. And after they leave, and they often don't stay long, the school goes backwards. To this, colleagues, is leadership full of power, but not love. And with the power of that love, you get short-term, but you don't get sustainable improvement. You get short-term improvement, but not sustainable improvement. Now, the most successful approach that they saw in these academies, they called the architects. They called these people the architects. Now, the architects took a more holistic view of what it takes to move a school in the right direction. They focused on teaching and on leadership. They introduced coaching and mentoring and development programs. Staff are supported, encouraged, and capacity is built. But they do other things too. They have clear, consistent behavior management systems. They have separate pathways for collaboration with different schools. They build a sustainable, long-term, improving agenda. They show clear leadership that takes people with them, and they build a sustainable future. The architects are about power and love in their leadership. Now, interestingly, the surgeons, the superheads, were typically paid much more than the architects. And actually much more likely to get a knighthood or a damehood in the country. But after the superheads left, after the surgeons left, the school's results dropped by an average of 6%. Whereas after the architects left their school, the school carried on improving for the next 3 years. Well, that's the difference. Power is needed, but love is needed too. Fast and far, not just fast. So let me try and sum up what I'm saying here about power and love in school leadership. The power side is, as a leader, you set high expectations of students and of adults. And you don't lower them because you've got used to it. You keep on pushing, you keep on setting expectations, you keep on driving. It's relentless. You challenge complacency and you walk into the wind. You know what I mean by walking into the wind? It's when you go into the staff room and it all goes quiet. That's when you stay. That's when you stay. Because as a leader, there can't be any part of the organization where you can't go. And you deliberately walk into the toughest parts, the difficult places. You have those difficult conversations. You walk, you know it's tough. You'd rather stay in bed in the morning, put the duvet over you. But you get up and you go to work, you go to school, and you walk into the wind. You have that difficult conversation. You challenge that poor performance. You deal with that difficult situation. You confront it, you take it on, you walk into the wind. That's the power side of leadership. And those who don't do that are the weak leaders who don't make a difference. And it's part of this, by the way, avoid slow no's. Avoid slow no's. If you're going to say no, say no. Don't keep them dangling for ages, then say no. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that says, if you want to stand, stand. If you're going to sit, sit, but don't wobble. Okay? So avoid slow no's. You just say it. You go for it. You walk into the wind. And you use data to challenge, and you have consistent systems. But you show love in your leadership. You co-construct the strategy. I remember years ago now, I visited the island of Santorini. And I knew that it was one of the most beautiful visions in the world. The caldera and the Aegean Sea. I've seen it in photographs. I've never seen it in real life. And I got to the edge to see this vision. And the mist had come down. I couldn't see a thing. I knew it was there. I knew it was there. And I knew I was going to see it. I just had to wait for the mist to clear. Okay? This is about how you develop a vision that's a bit misty, and you work with colleagues to clear the mist. So you get to the vision together. Get your clear vision. So co-ownership of the strategy. Build ownership. Demonstrate kindness and empathy. Be close to the climate and emotions of the organization. Know how people are feeling in your organization. Be invitational and ask for help. Invitational leadership is one of the best leadership strategies I've ever come across, and I use it all the time. I can't understand why people don't use it. An invitational leader says, I've got a problem, can you help me? Invitational leader says, I'm struggling with this. Would you mind, I know you're really good at this, would you mind helping me to think it through or work with me on it? An invitational leader doesn't say that they know all the answers. They open themselves up to help from others. There's a famous example of this when the mayor of Oklahoma City, a few years ago, went live on a national, on television at a press conference and said, it was New Year, he said, I've tried for years to lose weight and I've not managed it. Now I'm asking you, the people of Oklahoma City, to help me to lose weight. What happened that year is not only did the mayor lose weight, the whole of Oklahoma City lost weight that year. They're so identified with the mayor's challenge, they got involved themselves. Invitational leadership, involving people, inviting them, helping that they have ownership of it, and that everyone's helping each other. And build long-term, sustainable cultures rather than quick fixes. So that's about power and love in school leadership. And if you welcome challenge, which you ought to, and that's a good thing, sometimes it can backfire. This is the teacher asked the children what they thought about the lesson. Not use collective punishment, as it is not fair on the many people who did nothing, and under the 1949 Geneva Convention, it is a war crime. Okay, so I want to talk in my last part of the session about power and love in system leadership at national level. How we have power and love in our overall approach to education across a whole system. I had the privilege last year of working with a wonderful guy called Michael Fullen and writing, who I've known for many years. And we wrote a think piece together. It was called Upside Down and Inside Out, or Inside Out and Downside Up. I was looking at what's going wrong in education systems around the world. Michael and I both have the privilege of working all over the world with education systems. It's a real privilege to see what's going on and to help governments to think through how they improve their systems. And in this think piece, we said that there's something wrong with the big picture. Across large numbers of countries, across the world, there are struggles and tensions between governments and schools. Many of us have worked for years in systems which are caught in a struggle between country-level policy on the one hand and the action or inaction of individual schools on the other. Policy pushes in one direction, the profession pulls in another. The result is a type of friction. It produces heat but not light, plenty of activity but not enough systematic change or improvement in outcomes. Again and again and again, in country after country after country, we see this happening. Governments pushing for change, wanting to improve the education system, and the profession pushing back and not accepting the change. And we see, just to say a bit more about this, I'm not talking about Scotland necessarily, I'm talking about lots of other places around the world. We see this kind of behavior from governments. They're preoccupied with the interests of politically powerful adults rather than the interests of children and young people. They emphasize either support or challenge, but not a balance between the two. They're active and visible at central office level, but they're not close to schools. They don't visit schools. They're not connected with the realities of what schools are wrestling with. They sponsor new short-term initiatives without seeing the existing ones through. On average, every 3 years, they stop doing that initiative and start another one. They don't see those ones through. They see teachers and leaders as part of the problem. They're criticized. They're not good enough. They're letting the system down. They're the problem, not the solution. Their leadership insights are based on political dogmas or on the messages in the media or what seems to be popular at the time, rather than based on clear evidence. They impose top-down legislative or policy solutions to school effectiveness problems. And they're either risk-averse and slow to change, or they require too much incoherent change, which alienates teachers and leaders. I'm talking about country after country after country where we see this happening. You know, I feel sorry for governments on this, because it's tough, because, you know, as soon as you get into power, education is really important, so you want to improve it. You've got an opposition whose sole job is to attack you and say it's not good enough. You've got a media who wants instant solutions. You know the thing that's going to improve schools most, you know what that is. It's great leadership and great teaching. That's what's going to make the difference. But that's a 10-year thing. You can't do that in a year. It's going to take 10 years to raise the status of teaching, improve the quality, get the training better, develop capacity. That's a long-term strategy. And because you've only got a few years to make a difference, or even less, you go for quick fixes. Now, these things can make a difference. You can improve the curriculum. That will make a difference, marginally. You can change the structure of how the system works. That will make a difference, marginally. You can introduce new qualifications or assessments. That will make a difference, marginally. But those are easy to do because you can pass legislation. The hard thing to do is to improve teaching and improve leadership. But that's the thing that makes the most difference. And where you see this happening, in the best systems in the world, you see this kind of thing. Governments preoccupied with the interests of students. A good balance of challenge and support going on. They're engaging with and visible to schools. They're listening to what schools are saying. They're persistent, consistent, and sustained to long-term reform. They don't change their mind after a few years when a new government comes in. They have a long-term, consistent approach to reform. They treat teachers and leaders as part of the solution, not part of the problem. They have a coherent theory of change. It's based on evidence. They champion sharing of knowledge between schools as the key driver for change. They do change at pace, but they build coalitions. It's not top-down. They get a critical mass so that it's voluntary but inevitable rather than compulsory. People want to do it because they can see the value of doing it. There's a critical mass who are going to lead the way. It's voluntary but inevitable rather than compulsory. This is power and love in action at government level. And too often we see the power bit in government and not the love bit. Perfect example, by the way, is Michael Gove, as Secretary of State in England. He was great at the power thing, great at the change thing, but he didn't know how to take people with him. He wasn't very good at the love thing. So getting the power and love right at national level is equally important as it is at school level. But as you move towards a bit more autonomy at school level, This is a big shift for you in Scotland. You're giving money now directly to schools to improve equity. You're going to have these 4 problems. The danger is you're going to have isolated schools. Isolated because they're insular, either because they're overconfident, or they're insecure, or they're just too busy. And they'll cut themselves off and get on with the job by themselves. Or you'll have competitive schools, competing for glory, competing for children, competing for teachers. Especially when it's a time of hard to find great teachers. It's going to be an issue for you. You know, when the waterhole begins to shrink, the animals start looking at each other differently. When you've got fewer resources, when you've got fewer great teachers to recruit, that you're in danger of getting more competition here. Variability. If you give schools more autonomy, you'll get more variability. Some will do really well, they'll be very successful, they'll attract the best teachers, they'll attract the children. Others will struggle, and that you have greater variability in your system. And finally, a vulnerability. It will be, you feel vulnerable, anxious about results, and it starts to create bad stress, and then it becomes hard to attract leaders to go into fragile schools. So those are the 4 issues that you're going to face over the next few years if you're not careful and if you don't manage it well. And what Michael Fuller and I argue in this book, in this think piece, is that this kind of thing happens. Some schools doing fine, not our problem. Other schools struggling, that's their problem, not ours. That has not got to happen in Scotland. That has not got to happen in Scotland. That is the opposite of what you want to happen in Scotland. System leadership is when school leaders are almost as concerned about the children in their other school than they are about their children in their own school. That's the kind of thing that we need to happen in Scotland. So top-down or bottom-up change, now they work on their own. If you have top-down change, power without the love, you get pushback. You get solutions to problems you didn't even know you had. This top-down approach doesn't understand your context. If you say, well, make your own decisions, the love side without the power, you get coherence, incoherence, you get isolationism, you get variability. So what's the solution? Well, the solution, first of all, is making sure your government is addressing power and love in its leadership. But secondly, I think the solution is to get school leaders themselves, those who are working in the middle, school leaders, local authority people, those who are agencies in the middle, not at the top, to work collaboratively together and to seize the agenda and to make it happen. What Michael and I argue is that leaders can either remain a victim of fragmented and top-down policies, or they can turn the table. The idea is not to be a rebel for the sake of it, but to change the game from compliance to top-down approaches to purposeful focus. It's the responsibility of leaders to shape the culture and ensure that although they take account of any national accountability requirements, of course you have to do that, they develop an internal collective accountability system that leads to the right outcomes. As leaders, you say, right, we are going to work together in our locality, we're going to seize the agenda, and we're going to make sure we do right for the children in our context. We're going to take into account the national accountability system, of course, but we're going to add to it, and we're going to develop common outcomes that we agree to work together on in the interests of all children, and we're going to lead the way in that. This is a quote from a head teacher in England. "We are clear why we're doing it, to enhance the community, to work with the educational and wider community. It is my greatest joy to see other schools improve and see their children achieve. We celebrate their success. That's what it's all about." That's what I'm talking about. Where you as a leader in a school have great joy when other schools do well, when other children succeed. Because it's all about the moral purpose of a great education system, not just a great education in my own school. In England, we've been working with some teaching school alliances to build cultures of collaboration. And this is a quote from a teaching school. There's about 30 schools involved in this, 30 schools. This is their ambition. "We will draw upon our collective professionalism to create a learning community that enables every adult to make the greatest possible contributions and play their full part in fulfilling our commitment to our children. We'll set the bar high. We'll be ambitious. We'll hold ourselves to account for the quality and impact of our partnership. We know this is a unique opportunity to achieve something quite transformational, and we won't let that opportunity pass. Can you see that? You see what they're saying there? This is 30 individual head teachers in an area who are saying we're going to work together to achieve well for all our children. We're not going to wait for someone to tell us what to do. We're going to get together and we're going to do that. Now, let me just sort of say a bit more then about this power and love in system leadership and try and summarize what I'm getting at here. There's too many networks of schools that are full of love but not power. You get together, you meet, you share, you have a nice time, you talk about all the problems, you look at some ideas, but you don't have the power side. The power side would be about having clear outcomes that you're going to achieve together and being willing to be transparent about that, to publish it to your parents, to publish it to other schools. That's the power side of collaboration. Let me give you another example here. When I started to train to do the half marathon, I knew I'd have to get up early in the morning and do a lot of training to do the half marathon. So I decided I needed a moral purpose. So I decided to get sponsored, to sponsor to run for Macmillan Cancer Fund. So that gave me my moral purpose. So now I had a moral purpose to do the half marathon. You know, it still didn't get me up in the morning. You know, the moral purpose is all well and good. But when you've got to get up at 5:30 in the morning and go for a run, and you want to stay in bed, it's not enough. So I thought, I know, I'm going to make sure that I know that it's going to be good for me. So I'll be healthier, and that'll be my motivation. So now I had moral purpose, and knowing it was good for me. It still wasn't enough. Do you know what helped me to do it? I announced to 100 of my peers that I was going to do the half marathon, and would they sponsor me? I had promised them I was going to do it publicly. And it was to let them down would have been totally unacceptable. And that's why I got up at 5:30 in the morning and went on those runs. Public commitment to each other. We're going to do this together. My school, your schools. We're public committing. We're going to be held to account. Together we're going to do this, and we're going to make that public. And then going back from that is much harder. And that's the kind of thing we need. The power side as well as the love side. So seize the agenda, lead in the middle, create a local accountability system that is focused on collaboration, that's right for your context. You might want to have a focus for that. It might be about building resilience amongst children. It might be about literacy and numeracy. It might be about the arts. It could be about anything. But be clear about the outcomes you're trying to achieve together and publish them. Look outside as well as internally for challenge and support, and embrace peer review. Challenge groupthink and complacency, and step up and become a system leader. I want to talk about peer review in a minute now, because I think if you're going to make collaboration work to help to lead the system, reviewing each other's schools is a powerful part of that. Here's a quote from a guy who runs Pixel in the States. To set up a healthy feedback system, you must remove the power dynamics from the equation. You must enable yourself, in other words, to focus on the problem, not the person. Candor isn't cruel, it doesn't destroy. On the contrary, any successful feedback is built on empathy, on the idea that we're all in this together. We understand your pain because we've experienced it ourselves. Just think about that. Peer review, the power is equal. You're going to review my school, I'm going to review your school. There's empathy there, because we're both struggling with this. But you're asking for help, mutually asking for help. It's a very powerful thing to build up trust, to welcome people into your school, to look at what you're doing and give you feedback, and vice versa. That reciprocity is really important. So back to the love side. In your collaboration, when you seize the agenda, make sure no school is isolated, that all young people are included, not just the schools you like working with or the children you like working with. Demonstrate reciprocity, generosity, and moral purpose. Build capacity through great CPD and coaching within schools and between schools. Take responsibility for that. Develop collective responsibility across schools and shared ownership of strategies. Power and love in system leadership. Seizing the agenda, making it work for you with within your context across your group of schools. And just in case you think I'm talking rubbish, this is a quote from the Education Governance Next Steps document that was published this year. They actually quoted from the article I wrote with Michael Fullen, saying this is what the government of Scotland is committed to. Those things. That's the list. That's from your document in governance in 2017. It's just what I'm talking about. Making partnership work between schools. That is your future to make this work. If you get that right, you'll avoid isolationism, you'll avoid the competition bit, you'll avoid the variability bit, you'll avoid the vulnerability bit, because people will feel supported and valued, and you'll have power and love in your system leadership. So I just want to wrap up in the last few minutes to talk about leadership in times of change. One of my great heroes is a guy called Sir Tim Brighouse. He's a fantastic leader. He says if you're going to lead change, you need 4 things. Regard crisis as the norm and complexity as fun. Have a bottomless well of intellectual curiosity. A complete absence of paranoia and self-pity. And unwarranted optimism. That's how you lead change. Crisis is the norm. Complexity is fun. Bottomless well, ask, why? Don't feel sorry for yourself. And be optimistic in your leadership. I just want to talk about that last one a bit more. I visited the secondary school a few years ago. I used to spend all my time visiting schools when I was running the National College for School Leadership in England. And interestingly, head teachers used to think that I was listening to what they were saying. But I was listening to what they were saying. But more importantly, I was watching how they behaved. Because how they behaved was more important than what they said to me, in my view. And this head teacher was showing me around the school. Every child we met, she introduced me to. Every teacher or adult we met, she introduced me to and said, why they were doing such an important job. She had such a connection and relationships with the people in that school. And when she was off doing something else, I met with her leadership team. I said, what's it like to work with this leader? And they said, she's our storyteller. She's our storyteller. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, things are tough in this school. It's a tough school to be in. Lots of things are really challenging. She tells us the story of how it's going to get better. She tells us the narrative. She tells us the story. She's an optimistic leader. When I went to be Director of Education in Knowsley Borough Council in Merseyside many years ago, it's a very tough, deprived area of England, but the toughest area in England. And when I went there, we had the second poorest GCSE results in the whole country. And after a year of my leadership, we had the worst GCSE results in the whole country. And for me, this was a tough time. I went live on Radio Merseyside that morning, and the broadcaster said to me, with respect, she said, with respect, just give up, it's hopeless. The Daily Mail rang me up that day. They said, we want to do a story on the worst local authority in England. Would like you to do an interview. And the Liverpool Echo had a letter in it that week calling for my resignation because I brought disgrace upon the borough. For me, it was the dark night of the soul as a leader, and I wondered whether I was up to the job. A lot of angst. I had a mentor, and he helped me a great deal. It happened to have been Tim Brighouse. And but I realized through talking to my mentor that actually I was doing the right things, I just needed more time. So I got all the head teachers together, and I said to them, in 3 years' time, people will be coming from all over the country to find out how we have been so successful. And I'm telling you now, because it's going to happen in 3 years. Fortunately, it did happen. But what was needed most of all at that time was optimistic leadership, the ability to elicit hope so people could see it was going to get better. And it's really important that we do that we demonstrate that. Because if we don't think it can get better, how can we expect our staff or our children to think it's going to get better? That's our job as leaders, to elicit hope amongst those we lead. I do a lot of work in Africa, and I was in Nairobi recently, and I was being driven past a slum area, and just as we came out of the slums, I came across this name of a school, It's the best name of a school I've ever seen. I think it's on the next slide. Yeah. Soon Big Brain Academy. Don't you think that's a great name of a school? You know, that's optimistic leadership, isn't it? Come to our school, and you'll soon have a big brain. You can't take this a bit too far, though, by the way. You can't take it a bit too far. Before my father died, he gave me my old school reports. And I wanted to know what my French report was from my last year in secondary school before I did my O-levels. So halfway through that year, in French, we did our midway exams, and I was 5th bottom of the bottom set. 5 sets. I was the 5th worst student in the school. And I wanted to know what my teacher had written about me in my school report. And I found it, and I promise you this is true. The teacher had written one word: cheerful. You know, when you're 5th bottom of the bottom set, cheerful is not enough, is it really? It's just, so I think it's about pragmatic optimism, not just optimism. Pragmatic optimism. The ability to elicit hope, but to know what you're going to do about it. So just one last thing before I stop. As I say, I've done a lot of work in Africa. And I've been working in the northern tribal areas of Kenya, where the Maasai tribe are. And the Maasai tribe, when they greet each other, they don't say hello sometimes. Sometimes they say, Kasiri Ngera, which means, how goes it with our children, as their greeting. Because they know that if it goes well for the children, then all is well in their culture. They don't say, how goes it for your children? They say, how goes it for our children? In the end, colleagues, that is the most important question. In fact, it's the only question. And you have to be able to confidently say, ask each other, how goes it with our children? Not your children, not my children. How goes it with our children, to demonstrate power and love in our teaching and our leadership. Thank you.